So yesterday we got patch number 4, Blessing of the Omnissiah, that came with all of the things that we've been covering in the last couple of videos. So we knew we were getting the map changes. It gave us extra maps and sort of made the selection a little bit better. We also knew we were getting the armory exchange, which give us a way to farm specific great items for crafting. We also knew that there were going to be changes to how Sire Melks works. But interestingly, there was like a huge second part to that patch that I didn't even see until this morning, and that's what I'm going to be covering with you now. So I just want to quickly touch on the changes because they've also snuck in a few extra little small bits and bobs here, there, and everywhere that just weren't in the patch notes before. So the first thing we have are war sets, which is just a full loadout of all your weapons, cosmetics, curios, and builds, which is quite nice because I definitely play a couple on each class, and it's nice just to be able to access this quality of life feature. This is a really nice change, just saves a bit of time. Like to see it. We've also now got the changes for Sire Melk's Requisitorium weekly contracts in. We have a couple of new ones, which is collect diamantine and collect plasteel. And as they said, these are all much easier to do and way more rewarding. They also kind of have this new staggered system to completion on them as well. So for example, if we take kill monstrosities, the new sort of completion requirements are 2 monstrosities, 4, and then 7. For a reward of 160, 307, and 370, 700 auto ignates respectively. And it's cool, we have a name for that currency now, auto ingots, or whatever the hell it's pronounced as. We then, of course, also have finally unlocked the full crafting system. We have Earn Blessing and Re-Bless. For anyone who's still not aware, this just means that we're able to extract a blessing from a weapon, destroying it in the process. And we will then unlock the ability to apply that blessing to any weapon of the same pattern. So if you get it from a Katachan Devil Claw sword, for example, then you can put it back on another one, but not another weapon. This is account bound, so any weapon that is like usable on multiple classes, this applies for. And yeah, then you can put this new blessing on there, but it will lock the other one in place. It works exactly the same way that perks do. Now, I'm actually pretty happy with the crafting system now. I've always kind of like felt that the ceiling for weapons is pretty low on this game. There's usually like 1 or 2 blessings that actually make a difference. The rest of them don't. Now, we will get to some of the changes in this patch regarding that because there has been some pretty tasty buffs to some of them. But yeah, in general, most blessings kind of have a very minor impact on the gameplay. But you know, I feel like this is a pretty good crafting system. I do see some people saying that they would rather have full control over the weapons by, you know, not having it locked when you put a new one on, a perk or a blessing. I think that's a little too much, honestly, like allowing people to just handpick, cherry pick, and craft the absolute best weapon in the game will just leave you nothing to work toward, which will very quickly just make the game boring. I think this is fine the way it is. There needs to be some degree of RNG in it. That, you know, there needs to be a reason to keep looking for a better weapon. I feel like just, you know, crafting the best one you can right off rip, it's just kind of, it sounds good to some people. I don't see that being a fun way to sort of hit your player's power cap. We also have the exact information on the benefits of doing particular conditions and side missions as well, which is nice. There's not just a flat rate for a condition now. They all have like slightly different extra docket and extra XP rewards, which is good. You know, always felt a bit weird having low intensity give you the exact same bonuses as high intensity when it was like it was an easier mode. Plasteel and diamantine has been buffed pretty good across the board, especially plasteel and damnation. You get like double. You can get up to 800 plasteel in one damnation run. And across the board, it's been a nice big buff to it, especially on the higher difficulties. Diamantine as well got buffed, though. It's a bit more heavy on the lower difficulties than it was on like damnation. You only get like 5 more, which is basically nothing. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see that you can get a little bit more of that as well. We know about the Emperor's Gifts rewards at the end of every mission. This is great. Of course, that reward scales on the difficulty, whether you did secondary missions or conditions as well, which is good. We definitely wanted and needed this. Then item acquisition in general has just been buffed. The quality of the items that you get from like the store, Sire Melk and stuff like that have been just increased a little bit. Then we have emotes. Yeah, emotes are cool, I guess. It's better than not having them. You can only use them in the Morning Star, which kind of sucks because there's nobody in my Morning Star to emote to. But hey, you know, maybe maybe some of you have people in yours that you can actually interact with. But it's never been somewhere where there's been like any social interaction for me, so it's just one of those things that doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to have them. If we could see them actually in match, that would be super cool. But yeah, having them's better than not having them. And then here's where we're going to get into the real nitty and gritty stuff. This is like huge changes that they hadn't mentioned up until this point. And like I said, I didn't even see this because I didn't scroll down far enough on the patch notes. But they changed a lot of the blessings. They buffed a lot of blessings absolutely out the wazoo. There are some huge changes coming here. Now, I won't be covering every single blessing for every single weapon because there's a lot of crossover. So if there is a blessing that is on multiple weapon types, you can safely assume that the buff applies to all of them, but I'll only mention it for the one, and I'll only show the one on screen just in order to save a bit of time because this is a huge list of changes. So on the Ogre and Cleavers, Bash got increased. The critical chance bonus on this got way higher. On the tier 4 blessing, it went from 4 to 15%. Which is a big old change there. Devil Claw Swords, Fisher's Slice, and Rampage both got buffed out the wazoo. You can see Rampage is just like absolutely insane now. That's going to apply a huge damage increase to any weapon that can use it. Riposte and Precognition, this can be found on like finesse weapons like the dagger and the dueling swords. These are like crit based blessings. These also got buffed massively. Riposte on tier 4 is 4 times more effective, and on Recognition that is twice as powerful now. And then moving on to the heavy sword, this had some sort of actual changes to the weapon itself. The special attack does a lot more damage to sort of tougher enemy types, and on the Mark 7 and the Mark 9, the follow-up stab from the push attack has had the armor penetration increased as well. Now moving on to the standard issue Sapper Shovel, this had the finesse multiplier ranges increased for the light attack and the weapon special attack. Take a Swing, which I believe to be a weapon specific blessing, had its weak spot damage bonus increased by like an absolutely insane amount. On the tier 4 on the high end, it went from 15% to 60%. They do note here that the shovel weak spot damage was pretty low, thus the much higher bonus there. Limb Splitter as well had the negative effect of that blessing reduced by a lot. So on tier 4, just because this is the most prominent example, it used to apply a minus 25% attack damage on any swing after the first one. Now that's just been put down to 10%. Hopefully this blessing is now actually a net positive on DPS and not a negative. Before, this would actually make the weapon DPS go down. So this is a good change to see. Bloodletter, which is a blessing you can find on all of the chain weapons, had the amount of bleeds that it applies per special attack just absolutely cranked through the roof. Tier 1 went from 2 to 8 and tier 2 went from 4 to 10. You're going to be absolutely piling bleeds on now when using the rev up attack. Blaze Away got a huge buff. It used to apply 2% power per stack, stacking up to 5 times for a maximum of 10. They've moved it to 10% per stack, which means you can get to a maximum of 50% increased power when using this blessing. For the Trauma Force and Void Strike staff, Blazing Spirit got buffed as well. They increased the number of stacks that applies from 1 to 3, so that is a big healthy buff as well. Glory Hunter, which is on a lot of hard-hitting weapons, this replenishes toughness on elite kill, and it is really damn strong now. Tier 4 gives you 30% of your toughness back on an elite kill, and that is up from 10%. Just imagine if you're running confirmed kill on a veteran sharpshooter, which gives you already like 50% toughness for killing an elite. This is gonna get, you're gonna get like 100% toughness, and you're not quite, but you know what I mean, you're gonna get like what, 80% toughness from killing an elite. Absolutely insane. And for the Ogrin's Grenadier Gauntlet, Reassuringly Accurate has got a big buff as well. The toughness replenished by this blessing on the high end went from 10 to 30%. Even on the low end, the tier 1 went from 4% to 15%. That's a massive change. This is just a really cool change to see on that blessing. There's been an across the board buff for the Mark 5 infantry autogun, got a nice little buff as well. The magazine size and ammo reserve was buffed along with the power by 10%, so that's nice to see. And now we have the Lucius Hellbore lasguns getting another buff, which I was super surprised to see because this weapon was already really damn good after the last changes that they made to it. And yeah, now they've just made it even better. So they've increased the cleave, effectively doubling it from 1 to 2 average hit mass. I'm hoping this means that we can penetrate at least some of the weaker enemies and kill others behind them. They increased the magazine size by about 20%, which is really cool. And they've also increased the amount of damage it does against flak and carapace armor, which again, I'm super surprised to see because it was absolutely pounding armored units before. Now I'm excited to see how powerful it is now. This gun's going to be absolutely insane. Now moving on to some specific changes to blessings for the combat shotgun. Flechette, if I'm saying that right, the amount of bleeds applied per crit was increased from 1 to 6. So this thing is going to apply a crap ton of bleed. And full bore was increased by about 3 times across the board, making this again just way more powerful than it was in the past. Now taking a look at the heavy las pistol, this thing received a whole bunch of buffs. So they made it a little bit easier to aim with by reducing the sway. They've also increased the base damage range. They've increased the damage versus maniacs, bumped up the power of the special action push. They also increased the magazine size and reduced the spread on the hip fire. And then for blessings, Dum Dum had its effectiveness doubled. So for the tier 4, it went from 2.5% to 5% increased close range damage bonus. I don't think this is going to become all of a sudden a really, really powerful weapon to use, but for anyone who was using it in the past, it's now just, you know, quite a bit better. Like 20% more damage is nice. Yeah, so, you know, better than it was. If it's meta or not, I'm pretty certain it's not. And then speaking of pistols, the Shredder Auto Pistol's also got an absolute huge amount of changes to it. Starting with a small nerf, the range of the weapon has been shortened by a bit, but they have increased the amount of damage it does to maniacs by 50%, which is a lot. They increased the impact of hipfire shots as well, which is pretty cool. It's going to be knocking over or keeping enemies off of you and suppress a lot better. They've done the same for braced as well. And there's also braced buildup of impact. This is a multiplier to impact on multiple shots versus the same target, which is pretty cool. And this has been increased by a whole bunch, basically making it easier to stagger enemies if you keep shooting them. The magazine size has also been increased as well, which is really good. And there's a specific change to the Ripper Gun Blessing Born in Blood. This thing is doing about 50% more toughness regeneration on kill, which is good. I mean, I love toughness regeneration stuff, so nice to see that. There's some changes to some blessings specific for the kickback. Now, the kickback was already, again, after the last changes, like the Hellbore Rifle, becoming a pretty damn good weapon, and this is only going to help. So Punishing Fire has increased the power received on all tiers by about 3 times. So on tier 1 it's gone from 2 to 6%, on tier 4 it's gone from 8 to 15%. Nice big changes there. Expansive as well, this increases the power bonus to your weapon's special melee action, and this is by a lot. Before, the whole thing was just pointless. Before, like, tier 1 would give you 2% additional power. Whatever, right? Doesn't matter. 50%, however, yeah, that actually makes a bit of a difference. Tier 4 went from 5% to 80%. That is insane. So yeah, that's going to be pretty cool. You're going to be absolutely clobbering fools with the special action from this weapon. It's going to be pretty funny. And finally, for the weapons, we have the Power Sword. Now, this was like the only weapon to get an actual nerf, and that was the Power Cycler. They reduced the maximum amount of attacks from the charge from 7 down to 5. I honestly don't think this is going to make a huge difference. It's still going to be an incredibly powerful blessing. Probably still the best blessing to get on this weapon. And then Savage Sweep as well. Now, I can't say whether or not this is a specific to this weapon or across every weapon that gets this one, because this is the only example that we have in the patch notes. But Savage Sweep has had its effectiveness basically like doubled and a bit on all tiers, giving you a maximum of 250% cleave on tier 4. Whether or not that's actually that useful on this weapon, it's hard to say, because you have unlimited cleave when you're using the empowered attacks. And if you're using this weapon without the empowered attacks, then yeah, sure, it's making a difference, but I don't really see people do that all that often. Now moving on to some general changes with the game and with the classes themselves, starting with a small change to the way that Bleed interacts with the Assassination Mission bosses' shields. So before you could apply bleed to the shield and stuff like that, now you cannot do that. Also, when the shield goes down and you bleed them and the shield comes back up, it'll continue to bleed the health and not the shield like it did before. This is okay. I mean, it kind of sucks because you were able to absolutely shred the shields off if you bled them with a dagger build. But, you know, whatever. You're still doing damage to their health. It's fine. Ogrins as well have had just a bunch of changes to them to make them less prone to stagger when their toughness breaks, which is good. I feel like this is a great way to play into the class fantasy. They should be harder to stagger. I mean, they're huge. They've also replaced the feat Knife Through Butter with another one that gives you a damage bonus every time you stagger an enemy, which allows you to get up to an extra 50% damage on your heavy attacks, which is pretty cool. And then there was a bunch of fixes to the way that bleeds were applied and how that sort of worked with your Blood and Thunder talent, which is good. I mean, you know, fixes are always fantastic. Psychers unfortunately got a bit of a nerf here. The way that they quell passively with non-force weapons was too fast in the past, and now it's been more normalized to what the force weapons were before. So basically, if you were someone who used like a dagger or a dueling sword before to quell because it was really fast, it's now slower. That kind of sucks. And then I want to mention just a small change to the Poxbursters here. They now have friendly fire on their explosions, so they'll damage their own boys when they blow up. And along with that, we have a huge, absolutely massive list of combat fixes and tweaks. They're all pretty minor things, you know, bugs, things that weren't working as intended. If you want to read the full list, as always, there will be a link to the original post in the description. Now moving on to the final part of this patch, and this is the non-combat fixes and tweaks. The first part is mostly changes to maps where they fixed issues where you weren't able to pick up scriptures, grimoires, or if there were items in ammo crates that you weren't able to pick up. Any places where you were being shot through the ceiling or shot through the wall or shot through the floor, which happened a lot. They also added some more resources to certain maps, increased performance. You will notice actually on some maps they've added like airlocks where there weren't before in order to sort of reduce the amount of map you had to render, especially on Hab Draco. They fixed a bunch of issues where you wouldn't get incapacitated if you fell off the map, you just instantly fall to your death. Also places where you could get stuck or the bots would get stuck as well. And then finally, sort of tying a knot in this whole thing, they fixed a bunch of problems with clipping on premium cosmetics, which I think is kind of important as somebody who unfortunately bought a bunch of them. You know, no hate please, but yep, that's good to see that they're still addressing that. And I can tell you that it's not fully fixed, but they're slowly tackling them a couple at a time. But yeah, there's a huge list of just general fixes and bugs here that they've tackled. And yeah, I mean, this was a nice surprise, honestly, to see this absolutely huge addition to the patch that I had no idea was coming. And I like to think I keep a pretty good eye on this kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, it's safe to say we finally got the game we were promised at launch, and it's, you know, it's definitely way better now than it was 3 months ago. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm still feeling a little disenfranchised because I've basically completed everything the game has to offer already. There's very little incentive for me to come back in and play. You know, I've got enough materials to craft myself the perfect gear now with the new system. But it's not going to change the gameplay enough that it feels like, you know, a refresh. It feels like a breath of fresh air or anything like that. Sure, you know, my weapons are maybe doing 10-15% more damage, which is a lot. You know, that is a lot. But I've already done Damnation on every map. I've already done Duo Damnation on half the maps. There's nothing really left for me to do. And I think that's fair. You know, the game was only, or was it like $40 or something like that? It's weird. I got to convert it like from Korean won into pounds, into dollars. But, you know, it wasn't an expensive game, and I played it for like 500, 600 hours. But, yeah, there's still no reason for me to come back. If I was somebody who is waiting to decide whether or not to play the game, yes, I can recommend the game now. I think this will probably be the turning point for Darktide in terms of, you know, sort of public opinion of the game. You might actually see some positive reviews on Steam now. Heavens forbid. So yeah, I mean, if you've been waiting to get in on the game, I definitely recommend it for you now. If you've not played all that much, if you already own it, now it's definitely a good time to try it. I just feel though, unfortunately, like the player base has been devastated. There's basically nobody to play with now. I mean, you know, if you're in sort of NA East, NA West, maybe it's not so much of a problem, but if you're from anywhere else in the world, it can be pretty difficult finding a full group. If you are having trouble, if you're like me, if you're not in America, then definitely join the official Discord, because there is a looking for group segment in there, which does seem to be quite active still. I will leave a link for that down for you in the description. Along with that, I will have all of my socials as well. So there'll be my Twitter, my Twitch, things like that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for listening to me rant, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.